Without further ado, I would like to introduce our keynote speaker for today. So Dr. Tyrone Howard is a professor of education in the School of Education and Information Studies at UCLA. His research addresses issues tied to race, culture, access, and educational opportunity for minoritized student populations. Professor Howard is the author of several best-selling books, including Why Race and Culture Matters in School, All Students Must Thrive, and his most recent release, Equity Now, which you'll see in his background. And we're also excited to raffle off 6 copies of those tonight to parents who are here on the call. Dr. Howard is a native of Compton, California, where he also served as a classroom teacher. Professor Howard is a member of the National Academy of Education and is the current president of the American Educational Research Association, which is also known as AERA. If we could give a round of applause, emojis, some love for Dr. Tyrone Howard. We appreciate you for being here.
Thank you, Brother John. Good evening, everyone. How you all doing? Thumbs up, thumbs down, thumbs in the middle? Good, good, good. Thank you for having me. It's my honor to be here, and I want to thank John for extending the invitation on your behalf. I'm going to start calling him the soon-to-be future Dr. Lynch. How about that? I'm going to put it out there for
Appreciate that. I think we might have lost signal for a quick second.
African-American parents, African-American students. Your showing up says a lot about your commitment to your young folks, and I can't say how much that makes a difference in the lives of our young people. I appreciate John lifting up this sense of belonging, and those data that he shared are troubling, and I've seen data like that from other districts across other states, and it's the same thing. By and large, Black students tend to feel less connected to schools than almost any other subgroup. And in many ways, your data was really better than what I've seen in other districts. I was in LA Unified a couple of years ago, and you saw like almost a double-digit gap between where Black students were in terms of their sense of feeling belonging compared to other students. So why is that, one might ask? And I think in many ways it comes down to understanding what I want to talk about today. And if you hear me talk, I don't pull punches. I kind of just call it how I see it. I'm too old to try to be nice. I may step on toes, but I always say some toes need to be stepped on. I may ruffle feathers, some feathers need to be ruffled, but you all know what I'm talking about. So I'm going to share my screen real quick, if I can pull this up real quick. I want to start off here with why I think this starts is that I think it's rooted in, can you all see this okay?
Yes.
Okay, because I can't see. So much of this starts off in what I refer to as anti-Blackness. And there's been a lot of folks who have written about anti-Blackness. And as much as it is difficult for folks to wrap their head around this, I maintain that when you get a sense of why Black students feel less connected to school, the idea that the very notion of anti-Blackness is a belief where there is a deep disdain for Blackness, Black people, Black life, how people read Black bodies, how they see Black joy as a threat. And it basically casts Blackness as lacking in intellect, in need of constant oversight and surveillance, and just constant monitoring. And I think that schools historically, and even in the current moment, continue to sort of operate with sort of this ethos of anti-Blackness that is all too real. And I think that is a part of why we see Black students being disconnected in schools. Not the fault of Black students, but the fault of schools, I would argue, to not respond in more affirming ways. So therefore, I would go one step further. I'm a professor, so I got to give you some readings. So there's a wonderful book by Joy Spencer and Carrie Lucci called Anti-Blackness at School. And they unpack Blackness in really, I think, powerful and poignant ways. And what I like about this book is they are clear in saying that, look, let's not conflate anti-Blackness and anti-racism, because they argue, and I agree with them, that anti-Blackness is something very different. It plays out very different. It manifests very different. It shows up very different in ways that we all see and we all know. And part of what we as parents have to do is basically sound the alarm and say, listen, don't conflate these two concepts, anti-racism and anti-Blackness, because anti-Blackness is really foundational to the way that the United States has been operated. So to understand how anti-Blackness manifests. So how do we push back on that? And I'm glad that John asked me to talk about, affirming spaces. I think there's some ways we create affirming spaces for Black students that can combat anti-Blackness. And much of what I'm going to share, you all probably know, you all probably do, but I think it bears repeating. So just 4 key ideas I think we can use to begin to create affirming spaces. One, I always say, let's begin to normalize Black joy. And what I mean by that is that Black students, like any other group of students, deserve the right to be able to have spaces where they can laugh and talk and explore and dance and jump and make mistakes and sing and do things that young people do. Oftentimes, one of the ways that anti-Blackness manifests itself is that when Black students just begin to exhibit the same range of emotions that other students do, they are labeled as aggressive, they are labeled as hostile, they are labeled as being defiant, they are labeled as being difficult. And part of what we want to do is begin to create spaces that allow Black students to be 12 years old when they're 12 years old, that allows Black students to act like 5-year-olds when they're 5-year-olds, to allow them to engage in the same age-appropriate behavior as other students do. Frequently, we see that Black students become adultified, meaning they're treated and seen as being much older than they are. And when they don't sort of confine to those contours of how we see an 8-year-old who we think should be acting like a 12-year-old, it's an unfair place to place those students in. So we have to start by affirming and normalizing Black joy. And I say that because I'm deeply disturbed, and I study this kind of data for all over the country about some of our suspension data. And I've been an advocate of this for the longest because we still look at data that shows that we have data now that shows we begin suspending our babies as early as preschool. Let me say this again, folks, preschool. I don't know how and why we've gotten to the point where we feel like it's okay to begin punishing our babies at 3 and 4 years old. So what culturally affirming spaces do not do is do this over surveillance, over monitoring. When you look at the suspension rates for preschoolers in this country, it's deeply troubling. The most recent report that came out from the U.S. Department of Education showed that Black students, I didn't say students because they're babies at 3 and 4, they represent 13% of preschoolers, but they're 46% of the babies suspended once and almost half of the babies who are expelled from preschools. Again, how can you be 13% of the population, but be almost half of the percent of students who are suspended and or expelled from schools? So we send these messages at an early age that we don't want Black children to feel connected. We don't want them to belong. And when you look at this data deeper, why Black students are oftentimes suspended and expelled in preschool is because they're engaging in behavior that's very similar across the board to white students, Asian students, and Latinx students. But when Black students express the same kind of excitement, joy, or even frustration, they are seen as being difficult. So other ways we create culturally affirming spaces: believe Black students. I can't stress this enough, folks. Believe Black students. When your students come home and tell you that they feel like they're being treated as less than, there's probably a lot of truth to that. They tell you that they feel like teachers don't have the same kind of expectations for them like they have for other students. There's probably a lot of truth in that. They tell you that they feel like administrators don't always give them the same opportunities as they give other students. There's probably a lot of truth in that. I think we've got to start believing Black students, because when Black students begin to talk about and share what they encounter in schools, what we recognize that they are basically telling us, schools are telling me that I don't belong. Schools are telling me that I don't connect here. And frequently we begin to see schools that dismiss what students say when they say that they don't feel a sense of affirmation, they don't feel valued, they don't feel heard, they don't feel seen. So the thing we can start to do to create affirming spaces for Black students is believe Black students. When they tell us things that have happened in school, don't question it, don't undermine it, don't ask, are they sure? Begin to take some further steps so you can begin to get to the root cause of what they're going through at their schools. Another thing that affirming spaces for Black students do, and I tell my teachers this all the time, and administrators, is advocate for Black students. Frequently, we have school staff, administrators, teachers who see Black students not being given opportunities to be considered for a gifted and talented program, or see Black students who show high levels of intellect, but they're not recommended for AP and honors. We have to have advocates in schools that begin to speak up and advocate on behalf of Black students, plain and simple. In many instances, when issues around Black children come about, the same usual suspects, the Black faculty, Black teachers, are the ones expected to do all the assisting, all the uplifting, all the advocacy. We need all folks. When you see Black students being left out, when you see Black students being overlooked, when you see them being constantly monitored and surveilled, begin to advocate for Black students and ask, why don't we give Black students the same opportunities to be children that we give to other students? So we have to create spaces where we advocate for Black students. Another thing I would say we have to do is we have to begin to identify and speak about Black excellence. And I continue to raise this one because part of what happens in schools every single day in this country, but especially in places like Pasadena. Black students come to school full of genius, full of intellect, full of curiosity, full of excitement, but it oftentimes gets overlooked or doesn't get recognized to the degree that it should. I raise this because I know that we've done some work in the past with some of the admissions folks at UCLA to show that Black students are the group of students who are most likely to show high propensity to do well with AP and honors, but less likely to enroll in AP and honors because counselors don't recommend it, teachers don't recommend it, despite the fact that they show high promise in terms of grades and other types of indicators that suggest that they could perform well in these classes if they're just given the opportunities. So I would say we have to identify and speak about Black excellence because it is there and it's vital for teachers and school leaders to identify and discuss Black excellence. I would ask you to do some deeper analysis. How many Black students are in our gifted and talented program at my student school? How many Black students are in the AP and honors classes at my son's or daughter's school? How many spaces are there for Black students in leadership position? Begin to do the count because I think so often Black students have become accustomed to being overlooked. But I think we as the parents have to hold schools' feet to the fire to say, begin to recognize the brilliance that we know Black students bring to the classroom and to schools every single solitary day, okay? And then I think another thing we have to do is and this is where I want to, like, I think what you all are doing as a group of parents and advocates is so important. So I share what I call these thoughts and advice from Black families to educators, things that you should constantly and continuously sort of impress upon your schools. And I think, first of all, Black people have a right to be angry because we see things that happen in our schools. We see things that happens to our babies. We see things that happens to our children that makes us upset because we feel like we are being in repeat mode again. Some of the same things that we saw when we were younger, we see it happening to our sons and daughters. So I tell principals and I tell administrators and I tell teachers, why are you so put off when Black parents are angry when they feel like their children have been done wrong? Other people show up and they're angry, but when Black adults and Black parents show up angry, there's somehow something wrong with us. But know that you have a right to be angry when you feel like something is being done wrong to your young person. The other thing I would say is Black children have the right to experience joy in schools. I'm gonna keep saying that because again, I see just beautiful, brilliant, just enthusiastic Black children who are told to sit down and be quiet and don't move and almost don't breathe. Let Black children have joy. Let them laugh. Let them have fun. Let them tell jokes. When you feel like you can be your authentic self, that's when you feel a sense of connection. So experiencing joy in schools is something that all students should have the right to, especially Black students, because for so long, we know Black students are the ones who are told not to be happy in school. Let me say this, folks, and I'd be remiss if I didn't. We know that there are white people who are allies and co-conspirators. I say this again because when I give these talks, I oftentimes get some of my white brothers and sisters who get upset and say, well, what about us? We advocate for Black students. Yes, you do. Thank you for that. We recognize that. Continue to do that, but ask for more of your white allies and white friends and colleagues to do the same thing in the workspace. So we know that white people are allies and co-conspirators on behalf of Black students. We also know, and I hate to say this, but you all know it's true, we know that not all Black people act in the best interests of Black people. I hate to say it, but sometimes the biggest culprits of folks who engage in anti-Blackness are Black folks. It hurts me to say that, but I'll say it again. Sometimes the folks who engage in the most egregious acts of anti-Blackness are Black folks. So you got to be careful to recognize that not all skin folks, y'all know the rest, are kin folks for those who don't get it, okay? All right. I also ask teachers and administrators, see the best in us. Don't look for what's wrong with our students. See what's right with our students. Understand that we may not always show up perfect, but no students show up perfect. See the best in us, always believe in our potential. The question we should always ask our sons and daughters' teachers, what is your vision for my child? Where do you see my child going in your classroom? What do you expect my child to perform in your classroom? Because I want to know what your expectations are, because there's a bunch of data that shows that there is a direct correlation between the expectations that teachers have for students and how students perform in those classrooms. Look, I'm big on this one. Talk to Black families like they matter. Let me say this again. Talk to Black families like they matter. I'll say it a third time. Talk to Black families like they matter. I tell my principals and my administrative folks, listen, don't dismiss, don't discount, don't assume that Black parents aren't working. Don't assume we're not working professionals. Don't assume that we're single parents. Don't assume that we are uninformed about how educational systems work. Talk to us like we matter. Give us the same amount of respect and deference that you give to any other families, because frequently I see the way that Black families get overlooked and underserved. And to me, that's problematic. And we need to call it out when we see it playing out, okay? Then I would say, realize the pain that we have been through. There's a reason why Black parents show up angry. There's a reason why Black students show up angry, because there's a history in which Black folks, Black students, Black adults have consistently been told that we are less than enough, that we're not good enough, that we're too angry, that we're too aggressive, that we're too hostile, we're not involved enough, we're too involved, you're too loud, you don't say enough. In some cases, we feel like we can't win for losing. So there's pain, there's trauma, there's frustration, there's anger that we have been through. So I always ask educators to understand why we show up the way we show up at times. Then I'll say this, treat Black children as if your life depended on it, because I always ask my educators, are you giving the same time, effort, and energy to other people's children that you expect to be given to your children? And in particular, do you give that to Black children in ways that you would expect to be given to your children? Let's begin to have this idea that we're not talking about other people's children. We're talking about Black children. We're talking about all of our children. So those are just a few points I would offer up. You know, I could go on and on and on. John told me you had a tight schedule. He said, speak 15 minutes, get in and get out. I do want to leave you with one piece of information. So if you can, get your phones out real quick. My family gives out scholarships. The Howard Family Foundation gives out scholarships to high school seniors going to college. You can take a picture of this or take a picture of the QR code. We are accepting the application. These scholarships are given to Black students pursuing higher education. I want to strongly encourage you to have your sons and daughters, if they're graduating seniors or if they're already in college, to pursue these scholarships. We want to see these young scholars thrive, do well, have opportunity, and have some support as they do it. So with that being said, I will pause right there. And John, I don't know if you want to open up for a question or two. You mentioned the book that you're raffling off. If you don't get it, that's the QR code for that. And I'll stop right there.